Twilight Sparkle stumbled out of the dumpster and recollected herself as she shook a banana peel out of her mane. The alley behind Sugar Cube Corner was deserted and dark. She pranced away from the deeper darkness into the starlit gloom of the main road. Ponyville slept peacefully around her, the complete odds with what she had just left behind at the castle of the two sisters in the Everfree forest.
Wait, what was that just now?
Twilight looked around, her eyes searching the night sky for any sign of a pony-shaped blot of black.
I saw something. I know I did. I did not imagine all that. I just couldn't have.
Something had been in there with her in the odd abandoned ruins. She could feel it watching her as she entered the room where the elements had been kept. Twilight looked over her shoulder into the alley for a moment and started trotting away.
I need to go home. Do research.
Her castle. It didn't even have a proper name yet. It loomed in the distance beyond the office edge of the town. She kept the place that it was perhaps just a little fast dead into the night, with no moon to add extra light. Now that she was out of the Everfree, the sky was cloudiness with a million points of cold light twinkling above her. The moon is in its dark phase, as it sailed through the shadow of the planet. Had she the right sort of telescope? She could still pick out its front line, but on the ground unlit, it might as well not exist. Twilight turned to her left at the next intersection so she could hit a large thrift trail that cut Ponyville in two. That would take her straight to her castle and would be the brightest lit path. Her heart wasn't hammering in her chest quite as hard as it had been, but she was working up a sweat that was rapidly cooling. She slowed to a quick walk as she rounded the next corner and shivered. She threw a look back over her shoulder again. The road was as empty as it had been a moment ago. Was it getting cooler, or was it just her imagination? Twilight gulped down a fresh lungful of air and broke back into a full gallop. She needed a roof over her head, a closed door at her back, and a book in her hooves with all the answers. The chill grew worse as she ran, and it slapped the energy from her muscles. Her gallop slowed to a trot before she had passed the clock tower in the center of town. The hands read a quarter after midnight. Had she really been out that late? Had no pony noticed her absence? Twilight came to a halt in the town square and caught her hard. Her breathing ragged from exhaustion in the cold. Her breath came out in a cloud of condensation. She dumped and kicked her legs hard enough to spill her out onto the flagstones. Twilight grunted as her knees took the blunt of the fall, but she didn't look back. She needed to get to the castle before whatever it was caught up with her. Adrenaline forced her aching muscles to comply to her demands as she ran. Her knees started to ache immediately, and the pain became a pronounced stabbing sensation before she reached the far end of the town square. She knew her hooves wouldn't be taking her much farther and spread her wings, breathing them in time with the last of her momentum. Twilight pulled up sharply and reached the top of the buildings on the other side and tucked her hooves in just barely enough to clear the roofs. She banked to the right as her climb took over the chimneys and businesses around the town square. Ponyville still had mostly 1- and 2-story buildings, but she had hardly gained enough altitude as she pumped her wings. Balconies and raised attics, decorative weather vanes and lightning rods jumped out at her from the darkness as Twilight turned and weaved. She crossed another block before she climbed well high enough above the rooftops to even out. Twilight looked back as Ponyville swept by her below her. At the very edge of her sight, in the starlit dark, she could see something darker than the surrounding shadows, following across the ground like a mist or smoke. She flapped her wings faster, but it matched her pace with her and started to close the distance between them. Twilight focused on reaching her castle, and moments later, her heart flashed just as she crashed into an upper-level window. She trucked in her wings and sailed through the now open window until she impacted the carpet running in the hallway as she skid to a halt. Her knees screaming as Twilight lifted herself up on 3 legs as she tried to remember the layout of the castle and where she was. She rarely went upstairs. All the important chambers were on the main floor, except her bedroom, which was just on the 2nd floor. The rest of the castle's twists and turns were foreign to her. She and the girls had explored it after the castle appeared, and all the rooms were probably finished with furniture and decorations, but without the staff or true purpose, a use for the rest was a place beyond her. Twilight blinked as her memory kicked in. She hobbled down the hall and turned the corners and yanked the door open as she moved it and slammed it shut behind her. Her new home came equipped with several fireplaces, and the room she had chosen had its own, already stocked with enough wood to last until dawn. She threw a log in and used her horn and flashed again as the wood was set on fire with a simple combustion spell.
That'll kill 2 birds with 1 stone. No darkness, no cold, no ghosts.
The fire crackled to life, and the room was filled with light. Twilight took a moment to try and slow her heart rate down and steady her breathing before she looked over at her injured knee. Blood matted her fur, and further down, running in heavy rivulets to her fetlock. It was already dry and crusty, and when she tested the joint, it didn't feel broken. Her fur pulled, and the skin underneath burned.
I think I just scraped it. I need to clean it. Spike will know where the antiseptic cream is.
The fire in the fireplace splat glowing ember into the air, and the flames danced wildly as the log had set ablaze snapped. The sudden noise made her breathing catch, and all the efforts that she had put into slowing her heart seemed to go nowhere as it leaped in her chest.
Calm down, Twilight. It was just the log.
That gnawing noise came again. It was like a void. Her mind seemed determined to believe there were voices speaking to her, while her ears were reporting no incoming signals. Twilight pressed back against the wall, her eyes fixed on the fireplace. The shadows it cast grew long for a moment as the fire jumped again before all but suffered back itself. Twilight eased herself sideways, her hooves feeling the way for the door handle. The log popped and sizzled as ember drifted up. The flame looked like shooting liveless fireflies. Twilight felt the handle under her hoof.
Twilight Sparkle.
The light from the embers died, and the temperature of the room plummeted. In sudden darkness, 2 white-blue candles' flames appeared.
You won't.
She pushed the door open and ran. Her legs burned, but Twilight ignored it. It had followed her home. In a rush to get away, she had endangered her home, Spike, the Outdwellers, and Owlicious. She was still no closer to figuring out what it was, and now she only had a few books that she had and wouldn't be any help. Twilight opened the window and the end of the hall and then took air again.
I'm going to need the princess for this.
Support me on Patreon and Ko-fi. Links in the description. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe. Good night, every pony.